Alright, this is the Tuna Chucker LTD, video 1, doing the teardown and evaluation of the 460 cubic inch Ford V8 engine. We pressure washed the whole car last night to eliminate all of the various insects that have been living in it, and today we are going to, our goal is going to be to remove the top of the engine down to the cylinder heads in preparation for new gaskets and generally replacing anything that's wrong or broken on the engine. So this is all in preparation for the race on September 19th and 20th in Carolina Motorsports Park. Alright, so the car's been in hibernation for about a year and it doesn't look too bad under here. There's no real evidence of rodents or anything chewing on any wires. Everything's kind of more or less intact. When I rolled it into the garage last night, the brakes actually worked, which was a surprise, a pleasant one. It's kind of hard to stop a 2-ton car as it rolls down a hill, although the tractor stopped it somewhat too. So yeah, so let's pull out the air cleaner shroud, and it's actually pretty dry in here, so the combination of a crumpled up tarp and a ripped car cover and another tarp on top of that one actually did a surprisingly good job of keeping water out of here. There's a little bit of surface rust, but it rained last week, and so there wasn't really any water in here. Obviously we need to replace the air filter, so we'll add that. And when I edit this film, maybe I'll put some numbers on here, like number 1, replace air filter. So we'll need to take care of that. Now we'll take off the housing, and obviously we need to clean this out and oil it. Let's just put that, I'm not sure where to put that. We have a 460 or a 302, a Corvair engine, some Volvo engines, a vacuum cleaner, another Volvo engine, an air tank, bottle of Old Harper, some illegal fireworks, a spare C6. I guess I'll just pile it on top of this Simca here. That's a phrase you probably don't hear very often. We'll put the air cleaner housing over there too. 55. Alright, so here's the carburetor. Number 2 on the list, or 3, whatever number we're at. Clean and rebuild carburetor. We've had issues with that before, and I'm sure the cobwebs in this need to be blown out at the very least. So we'll need a carburetor kit, gaskets, filters, whatever other black magic they put into the boxes of these things. Alright, I'm going to start just assembling things and come back once we get some stuff apart here. I wanted to remark on one thing that I noticed, just so I remember. The spark plug wires are numbered. Ford Racing Performance did these. I guess that's what you get when you spend more than $8 for a set of plug wires. So just remember where all the plug wires go. That's obviously number 7 cylinder. This is number 8. This is number 6, and this one, of course, is number 2. No, I'm kidding. It's number 5. Alright, so there's that. Also, the wiring, I noticed, it's not in bad shape, but it's just very disorganized. We had stuff just kind of run everywhere, and then just this random lot of really bad speaker wire that I think goes to the coil. So I didn't disconnect anything. The battery's disconnected, but we might want to look at cleaning that up a little bit. Took some connections off the carburetor, brake booster, and saving all of the hardware in this little bucket here, which will of course get promptly knocked off the A-pillar once it gets full. But alright, next off we'll get the carburetor off. I'm not sure why we have this EGR plate on here. It adds the potential for vacuum leaks, That looks pretty cruddy under there on the carburetor. Let's just set this down here. I'm not sure if the carburetor will fit on the intake without it though. Yeah, see, it hits over here. The throttle linkage hits on the intake manifold. But if we had a spacer, Q writing somewhere here, carburetor spacer, not EGR doohickey thing, whatever. Maybe that would be an improvement that would prevent potential vacuum leaks. Note distributor rotor orientation before removing distributor. I'm not sure if this is important on a Ford or not, but we'll find out. So that's where the cap was, like so. This was the number 1 right here. Kind of give you a broader view. Number 1, okay. Rotor thing, okay. Now we can take the distributor out. Maybe. Distributor out! Distributor out? Distributors don't like to come out when you're holding the camera. Alright, whatever part we're at now, 460 engine disassembly. A couple of things noticed now. We got the valve covers off, and there's some surface corrosion on the rocker arms as well as the push rods. And it appears to be on all of the top rocker arms and push rods, mostly in the front of the engine. I'm not sure what that's from. The actual point where the rocker or push rod enters into the rocker arm seems to be corrosion free, and the push rods spin and feel good. I don't notice any catching or anything, so I guess it's fine. Sure. The other side has some, but it's not as bad or pronounced. Just a little bit here and there, and a little bit of oil emulsification, but really not too bad. It's actually worse on the driver's side bank. So we pulled the upper radiator hose off. Flexi hoses are clearly the superior way to go here. This one appears to be a lower radiator hose because it has a spring in it, and I can't collapse it. It's not really a problem, just kind of interesting. So here we have the thermostat, and there's some junk on that. I'm not sure what that is. And this was a 180 degree thermostat. I'm sure you can't read that, but it was and is. We talked about replacing this with a spacer, so that's another potential action item. We need to discuss that. And I guess now we'll move on to removal of the intake manifold. There are a lot of weird bolts that hold on the intake manifold. There, not that one. There, and then kind of the same on the other side. There, and there. So try to remember that when you're putting it back together. Electrical safety. Oh, another thing to note, and I'll turn on my flashlight for this. Where is it? Okay, this thing right here. See that? It's cracked. That's the thing that mounts this bracket, which was the air conditioning bracket, to the engine. So we probably just want to cut this off. It's useless, and just leave the little bit there that spaces out the alternator. Okay, good idea. Now we remove the intake. Whoa! Intake moves! That's a good thing. Alright, now I'm going to need both hands to take this off. Intake manifolds are freaking heavy for V8 American cars. So the intake manifold's off. We got a nice pool of oil in there, which I guess is good, and a pile of brown stuff that kind of looks like that stuff that gets stuck to the bottom of your waffle maker after you've made about 20 waffles. So this looks like it'll come right off. And ooh, that's nice and clean. That's very reassuring. Wow. Yeah, the gallery looks like brand freaking new. That's the cam lobes are right down there. They actually look really nice actually. So yeah, wow. I was afraid with the corrosion that we saw in the lifters and the push rods, but this is really nice. Wow. The gaskets look pretty shoddy. There was some RTV used here, obviously, so that could be a problem. But generally it looks pretty clean. So I think if we clean this up, take the old gaskets off, and yeah, this should go back together pretty nicely. But we got to keep digging. I think the heads are going to be next. Hey, look what's climbing around on my cylinder head. I'm not sure what that is. It's very ugly though. Please get off of my engine. Please don't crawl into my engine. What an ugly bug. Exhaust manifold loose, driver's side. Another exhaust manifold has been liberated from the head. And there's the gasket. Exhaust manifold, passenger side gasket. Yeah, I know, kind of irrelevant. Garbage. Little trick I like to do for removing push rods and rocker arms. I take a piece of cardboard and I punch 8 holes in it with a screwdriver, and then as I remove the push rods from the engine, like so, I put them into the cardboard in the same orientation they came out of the engine. This is especially important on an engine like this, which I'm not sure what other engines are like this, maybe they all are, but the push rods are symmetrical from one end to the other. And you kind of want them to go back in the engine the same way they came out. So you put them in the cardboard, like so, and then you remember which direction they came out of the engine. And you take the rocker arm and you place it with the rest, and you hope that no one bothers your box and mixes them all up, otherwise you're boned. And then I'll get a separate box for the other side. So this is Summit box facing the direction of the engine in the order in which they came out of the 6 through 8 cylinders. And here's a Pittsburgh jack box with push rods and rocker arms in it, corresponding to the passenger side of the engine, cylinders 1, 2, 3, and 4. When we put the head bolts back in, we want to remember there's 2 kinds of head bolts: the bottom head bolt and the top head bolt. As you can see, the top head bolt is about 1/2 inch shorter than the bottom head bolt. So just remember, short on top, long on the bottom. So we had to take off this ridiculous alternator bracket. As you can see, well, I'm going to disconnect the alternator here in a second, but we've got the positive terminal here and then some other terminals here and here, just to kind of get the orientation of them. And this was the air conditioner bracket here. That can be cut off. That mounted to the water pump and it broke, so that can be cut off. And so really all we need are this mounting point here for the alternator bracket, and then obviously this mounting point here. So really everything, you could probably cut it like right here and just leave this gusset and get rid of all this, because that's completely worthless. And all you need is these 3 points to support the alternator anyway. The reason we had to take that off is it bolts to the front of the head here. So now that that's gone, we can take the heads off. To remove head, insert non-marring end of crowbar into port, pull port with hand, head pops free, engine wets itself. You've lost your head. No, you've lost your head. Ah, we've lost both heads. Okay, sorry, I'll go back to being a mechanic. One thing I noticed after removing the heads, this is the number 8 cylinder. And it appears to have some goo living inside. There's a little bit of a ridge here and some shit, I'm sorry, bleep that, editor. So we'll probably need to clean this. The engine's not seized, so we'll just need to clean that off, move the piston down maybe, and kind of buff that out when we put this back together. The rest of the holes look pretty good. We've got these cooling ports that are raised a little bit to kind of reinforce on the, looks like the front and the back. There's nothing else on the head that sticks out at all other than the gasket. Looking at the gasket, I don't see any traces of crosstalk between the cylinders, although it's kind of hard to tell. There may have been a small leak. Moving over to the passenger side, I got some kind of general corrosion from the coolant, it looks like. But again, the valves in the combustion chambers don't look too bad. A little bit of carbon buildup on that valve, and that looks okay. There's some corrosion on this tube here on the number 4 cylinder, it looks like, and a little bit of water that got into the cylinder hole, but I think that was just from the water jack because there's still some water in there. I had drained the radiator over the winter, so we didn't have to worry about any freezing issues. Now I'll get my shop vac and clean that out of there so we don't get any flash rust, and I'll spray a little pea blaster down all the holes before we leave for the day. But otherwise, doesn't look like it's in too bad a shape. I'm going to measure the cylinder bores and get the diameters there, so we make sure we get the correct head gaskets. Doesn't look like this engine's ever been bored over or rebuilt or ever maintained at all, but we'll measure the bores anyway to make sure. I think it's a 4.26 or something like that bore. So we need new head gaskets. Obviously we need a new intake manifold gasket. We need a new carb gasket, potentially a carb spacer to remove the EGR badness. We'll need, looks like the water pump was replaced, so that'll be fine. Probably want to just go ahead and replace all the hoses while we're at it. The belt was brand new. I think the fan clutch was good, so that's good. The lower radiator hose is fine. Exhaust manifold gaskets, we'll need those. And spark plugs look good enough. Plug wires were good. Distributor cap and rotor looked like they were fine. Just do another oil change obviously once we get it all buttoned up back together. And that's about all I can think about for now. Rebuild the carburetor, we talked about that earlier. So looks like we're in good shape for when we decide to put this thing back together again. I guess when I get a chance, I'll start cleaning these heads off, get the old gasket material off, clean the block off so we can get that old gasket material off, and we'll put together a shopping list and figure out what we need to order. So looks like we're in good shape. No major surprises today. The engine came apart relatively quickly. We've got all the bolts categorized over here. We've got all the bolts that came out of the engine with the exception of the head bolts. The head bolts we saved down there, 2 different sizes of head bolts. And the rest of the equipment is kind of piled on top of the Simca there. Need a new air filter. We talked about that earlier. And so I think we're in good shape. We also talked about, as far as the chassis on the car goes, we wanted to replace the shock absorbers on the front and rear. So we'll get some decent aftermarket shocks for that. Seat belts are in the car, they're in good shape. The battery was kept on a tender. I did mention the exhaust pipes seem to be a little bit loose. They may be okay. We'll take a look at those once we get the car jacked up and we're doing the shocks. The brakes worked, which will be good. We'll bleed the brakes, so they should be ready to go. and flush the cooling system. Get all the dirt and crud and rust and whatnot out of the cooling system. Flush the radiator and flush the block once we get everything back together again. Alright. Now that was a very quick engine disassembly. I think that took maybe about 25 minutes of video time. In actuality, it only took about 2 hours of real time. So, yeah, we're in good shape then. Hope to see everyone who's going to come and put this thing together on the 25th. Bye.
I may need to revise some of what I talked about earlier. Too lazy to edit it, so I'm just going to append this to the end. I cleaned off the top of one of the pistons. This is the number 6 piston that we're looking at here. If you notice, right here we have some markings on the piston. It looks like a .060. So what that tells me is that this piston is 60 thousandths oversized. That means that this engine was rebuilt at one point and the block was punched out 60 thousandths of an inch. Now I don't know that much about big block Fords, but 60 thousandths is a lot to punch out an engine. And I realize we've just lost focus here. Hold on a second. So as I said, we're about 60 thousandths over on the pistons. Now looking at the cylinder bore itself, starting at the 1 here just because it's easier, we're looking at about 4 3/8 of an inch on the cylinder bore. I couldn't find my calipers, so this is about as accurate as it's going to get, but about 4 3/8 on the diameter, 4.325. As I recall, when I was looking into this earlier, I think the bore on the 460, the stock bore, is like 4.2 something. An engine board 60 over could be contributing to our hot running issue, that we have thinner cylinder walls. I'll have to look and see kind of what's acceptable for a 460. I feel like there's a lot of meat in the walls, but you know, I'll have to kind of look into that and see. But so we definitely need to get some head gaskets for a 60 thousandths overboard engine, and that'll be that'll at least get us back to where we need to be. Looks like the rain is well, we're out of focus here again, but the rain started really coming down. So I'm gonna head in the house, grab a bite to eat, and put this video together, and then we'll contemplate on what our next step's gonna be.